All right, everybody, welcome to CSM Mastermind. I am Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our success coaching training program. I'm sorry, I'm not looking at my camera as I normally do. We've had some technical difficulties today, but doesn't matter. We're back for a monthly live webcast today talking about how emotional intelligence affects relationships with both your customers and internal colleagues. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training, with nearly 19,000 students from more than 92 countries. Our training programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. We are still accepting registrations for our fall 12-week live coaching program that's being offered under the University of San Francisco School of Management, led by yours truly. It's a great program. Our next cohorts launch this week, but because we're off next week for the CS 100, you can still join and not find yourself behind. Ashley's going to drop a special coupon code that's good through the end of the month for those interested in joining us for the final set of coaching cohorts for 2022. We also have a number of standalone courses taught by industry experts, including data-driven decision-making, starting next week, and we have some open slots available along with a different coupon code that Ashley will also drop in chat for those that are interested. That was a mouthful here. Find out more at successcoaching.co. For those of you who haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that is relevant to customer success, regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers that you deal with. We aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for our upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. Click on the events tab at the top of the page to find out more. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded. What happened there? What happened there, Ashley? Our housekeeping items died. This webinar is recorded and we'll be posting a replay along with the transcription on our website early next week. Sorry, folks. We've been having a bunch. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of technology issues across the board today. We will be taking questions later on during this webinar, so please don't be shy and use that Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen to upvote or ask a question. We're also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live and have somebody monitoring that feed. So we still are broadcasting on LinkedIn Live, right, Ashley? Are we good there?
Yes, we are. We're
awesome.
live.
We had some problems with LinkedIn Live as well. It was just a cornucopia of technology issues. But if you have questions and you're watching on LinkedIn Live, please post them and they will be relayed to us. Thank you, Tracy, for monitoring that. Also, please keep all commentary to the chat window. So if you got questions, Q&A, if you got commentary, chat, we're good to go. And we'll remind you, if you place a question in chat, we're going to gently remind you to put it into Q&A. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those practicing customer success on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Cami.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cami Toribio. I work for Avolution. It is a software company that sells the enterprise architecture solution called Abacus. I've been with Avolution for 2 years now, so I think I'm probably the rookie here, but I am a CSM in 2 languages, so that's kind of fun. I get to do English and Spanish.
That's impressive. And I guess, Cami, you might have some special guests out in the audience.
I do. My mom and dad are here.
Awesome. Proud parents. Love that. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Cami. Oh, Justin, you're up.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. My name is Justin Harvey. I am a Senior Director of Customer Success at Flowsum. Flowsum is a release management tool that was built and is designed on the Salesforce platform, so it's for Salesforce developers. A lot of my experience actually comes from a background in psychology. I studied my undergrad at Ohio State, got my bachelor's degree from there. And then I went on to study behavior analysis, which kind of allowed me to understand emotions and behavior kind of at the same time, which was really, really cool. And then I got my first dive into customer success of my first SaaS company about 6 years ago, and been loving it ever since. So yeah, I'm excited to be talking about emotional intelligence today.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Justin. And finally, Katie.
Hey everyone, I'm Katie Mock. I'm our Director of Enterprise Client Management at Scoopos. I've been here for about 3 years, and we're a data platform provider that surfaces up insights and analytics to some of the world's biggest consumer product companies. Some of our companies on our roster are like Pepsi, Hershey, Coca-Cola, so really no pressure for me or any of my CSMs in our day-to-day work. Similar to Justin, I actually got my undergraduate in psychology and neuroscience, so hoping to provide you guys with some good tips today, as well as not make my professors disappointed in me.
Awesome. I'm sure they won't be disappointed in you. Have any of them dialed into? Do you have any of them dialing in as well?
I don't. I should have sent it to some of them.
Yeah.
Got some feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Well, excellent. Once again, we all appreciate your time today. Now let's get to the topic. It shouldn't come as a shock to hear that a bad customer experience can really hurt your business. In a survey of 15,000 consumers, which I believe Ashley is going to drop that link in chat, by the way, PwC found that 1 in 3 customers will leave a brand that they love after just one bad experience. And 92% would completely abandon a company after 2 to 3 bad experiences. And while it's similar, but not the exact same in B2B, bad experiences are not a good thing. Likewise, a great customer experience can be quite profitable. The same survey found that 86% of buyers are willing to pay more for a great customer experience, and 49% will make add-on purchases on the spot after receiving a personalized customer experience. With so much on the line, developing emotional intelligence skills in your customer-facing teams is more important than ever. At its core, customer success is about building authentic relationships that are based on trust. Customer-facing individuals with a high level of emotional intelligence can connect with customers, manage conflict, demonstrate empathy, and manage their stress levels. So to get us started, I'd like to go around the virtual table here and talk through some of the key skills that you need to exercise for a high level of EQ. Tammy, what have you got to say on this one?
Yeah, so I guess in kind of list format, what comes to mind, empathy, personability, approachability, kind of the ability to sense discomfort, sense kind of emotional shifts. When you said more important than ever, I thought about now how so much of us are working remote. And so really exercising these skills through a screen, remembering we're humans, and sensing a shift without body language is definitely not a challenge, maybe an obstacle with working remote. So
being socially aware.
Socially aware and
Yeah.
really exercising that even through a screen, and we don't have human to human environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Justin, what do you got to add?
Yeah, I would kind of second Cammie. I think social awareness is really important. I think on top of that, management as well. It's great to be able to be aware of those emotions, but being able to manage them in high stress situations, in high strung situations where you're talking with customers on a daily basis. And so I think it kind of goes back to self-awareness and self-management too. It's not just about understanding the customer and their emotions, but yours as well in that moment, because we as humans tend to feed off of one another when it comes to emotional interactions.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that interactions with customers can be stressful?
No, not at all. They're all easy. They're all easygoing. No one should ever have any problems.
Not at all. Not at all. Katie, what about you? What do you got to add to that?
Yeah, I love those that Cammie and Justin brought up. Some of the other ones that I always look for, either in myself or when I'm looking to hire additional folks to my team, is really that adaptability. Being able to be in those situations, read those, manage their own emotions, and adapt to what's going on while still remaining kind of positive about the situation. Obviously, a lot of our customers feed off of our own energy. So if they see that we're upset or getting stressed or getting a little frustrated, they're then going to react in a similar behavior. So I think that's a really important piece. And then I also love to look for active listeners. I think listening to what others are saying with the intent to understand versus the intent to respond, which is very hard for all of us to do. I think that goes miles in the customer relationships.
Yeah, active listening is huge. Active listening. People say, I get asked all the time, what are the 2 or 3 most important skills that that people in these types of customer facing roles need? And my response always, my top 2 are empathy and active listening. You need to be able to empathize in order to connect with people. And we got 2 ears. People have heard me on this webinar series before. I repeat this constantly, but it's so important. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Right? We should be listening twice as much as we speak. So we talk about the skills that we need to have high EQ. So I heard self-awareness, I heard self-management, I heard social awareness, relationship management. What about motivation? How does motivation play a role in your EQ?
I can jump in. I think that's a huge one. People who are highly motivated are likely not only to be go-getters in the typical sense that you think of, but they're also going to be your employees or your customer success managers that are looking for feedback, not only from you as they're going through and kind of growing in their own career, but they're also going to ask that from their clients. What can I do better to service you? How can I make this relationship better? What do you need from me that I'm not already giving to you? And they're also going to continue to look on what they can improve and really bring that self-management and that self-awareness back in, kind of looking at their old calls or how something went with an on-site meeting. What can they do to make that better the next time? And they're kind of really never going to stop doing that, which is awesome to see. And on the flip side, when you see someone with low motivation, they really want to get out of that situation as fast as possible. And I know we've all been there. I can even tell you from experience, my first webinar, I wanted to respond to whatever questions I got asked and get out of there before anyone knew I was there. Yeah. And it takes a really long time to be comfortable and kind of sit in those emotional states when you're kind of either nervous or stressed and working with a client or getting that feedback. So having that intrinsic motivation is just going to make a lot of that easier for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would just kind of second that, Andrew. I mean, I think if we're looking at some of the skills that we've been talking about, motivation is probably just as important, maybe if not even a little bit more important than some of the other skills that you need to really hone your emotional intelligence, because, some of us by nature might have a higher emotional quotient than others, but if you have the motivation, the desire to want to learn the skills more, you are going to intrinsically put yourself in those situations so that you can do better, so that you can ask for that feedback from others.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Cami.
No, you go. It's okay.
No. I was actually going to ask you.
Oh, okay.
So go for it.
Yeah. When I hear the word motivation too, I start to think about intention. So what are you motivated to do? Right. So if the intention is to build these relationships and have these intentional conversations, you could have an hour call scheduled and you just want to get off as quick as possible. But if your true intention is to build these relationships, gets closer with your clients, then you're more motivated to kind of have the right intentions to stay on the call to build the relationship. And of course, yes, that comes with comfort. Katie, I know you said at the beginning, if you're nervous, I remember when I started, at the end of presentations, okay, are there any questions? Okay, good, no. Want to end the call really quick because I was scared they'd ask me something I didn't know. But, now that I'm less nervous and my intentions are to get closer and build better relationships, that definitely kicks in.
Well, and that motivation can be, that motivation can kind of spread. That motivation that you exhibit, right, can be, you can spread that across to your customer, to others on your team. And really motivation, the reason I asked this, because nobody had mentioned it, motivation is really the foundation, right? Because the more motivated we are, the better we're going to be with relationship management, the better we're going to be with social awareness, the better we're going to be with self-management, the better we're going to be with self-awareness. And I think what's also important is to recognize the motivation or the lack of motivation that some of the key stakeholders on the customer side of the equation may have. right? Because that's something that we need to be able to recognize. We need to address quickly, and mitigate, because that's a huge risk if we have people that seem to lack the motivation. So, so we've talked about a bunch of skills, a bunch of EQ skills. What are some ways that you each recognize and or measure your own EQ? How do you enlist some of that self-awareness to determine, okay, am I motivated? Am I stepping back? Am I employing the right empathy?
I'll jump in quickly, Andrew. I think one of the first things that I did was researching emotional intelligence. I had to understand what it was in the first place. There's actually a book out there that you can actually buy called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which is for anyone who's looking to try to understand their own emotions. I would definitely, yes, exactly. I would highly recommend.
Yep.
Highly recommend reading the book, because it even gives you exercises that you can do in there. And for me, one of the easiest ways that I find self-awareness is by writing it down. I don't know where that comes from, but I have to write it down in order to be able to understand what I'm doing in that moment. And so emotions for me, like high stress, high anxiety, sadness, or whatever I'm feeling, it's almost like a journal. I keep a diary of how I'm feeling, how I felt in that moment, what could have potentially caused me to feel that way, and how did I react in that situation.
Yeah, this is a great book, Travis Bradbury. There's absolutely no paid placement going on, by the way. Purely coincidence that Justin mentioned that. We did not mention in the pre-call. It's one of our go-to books. It's a book that we also put as recommended reading in our content, and I've incorporated some additional content from this in our level 1 refresh. So great book. Definitely check it out if you want to learn more about emotional intelligence. Katie, Cammie, anything to add?
I agree with Justin. I think journaling and kind of writing things down is one of the best ways to just kind of take stock of where you're at. I like to put goals to it too. I know that myself personally, I'm very good. I have a very high EQ when I'm in front of clients or when I'm, in front of leadership. I think sometimes I can lose my cool a little bit at home in my personal life, where you do let your guard down a little bit more. I lose a lot of the emotional intelligence if my husband or, a pet makes you a little angry. So I do think it's worthwhile to look back at those times too, make goals around, how did you respond? How would you prefer to respond? And then kind of looking back over the past month, over if you're, the winter time is always a good time, everyone's home, kind of curled up by the fire, thinking about, the last 3 months, where could you have improved, what was happening, and are you on the right path? I think it's a continuous growth. So you always have something to improve on there.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. By the way, just a reminder, Q&A button, bottom of the screen. If you have questions that you want to ask, we're going to get to them in probably about 10, 15 minutes. Questions, or if you see questions in that list and you want to upvote them, that will move them higher up the list, and we'll answer those first. But Katie, you bring up a great point, and I think it's important to remember that what we're talking about today is not just something for customers. It is, having a good handle around your emotional intelligence and understanding how you yourself tick, and the components of and the skills that make up your EQ, not only is helpful in interfacing with your customers, but also your internal colleagues, as well as your personal life. The better you are, the higher your EQ is, the better you're going to be at establishing and maintaining relationships, of course, with your customers, but also with other internal folks and your personal life. And with your internal folks, and I'm not going to get anybody's personal life, but with internal folks, customer success is a team sport. We can't do this alone. When we go to product to ask for something, when we go to sales to help them understand about misset expectations, or we go to marketing to help them better understand how the ideal customer profile has evolved since the last time they put a stake in the ground, we need to think about, we need to employ empathy, and we need to think about their perspective in order to give us the best chance possible of landing whatever it is we're going to be proposing, whatever it is we're going to be saying. So we want to employ these same skills that we're using with our customers, with our internal folks.
Yeah, I would second that, Andrew. I think, I think me personally, I don't directly engage with customers all the time anymore. When I do, usually it's an escalation call. So emotional intelligence is very helpful there, but I use it with my team members all the time. I think it helps me connect with them and understand them as individual CSMs and how they operate on a day-to-day basis, and how they might interact with their customers. So I think it's a very important skill that we could use in every part of our lives.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and to kind of take that one step further, because I know Justin and I both sit more in a management type role, it's really important to have, as we're talking with the other leaders of our company, and customer success, even though a lot of us, I've been in it for nearly a decade, it's still a relatively new concept to some leaders. And we're in charge of really inspiring them to believe in us and getting that teamwork so that we do have sales and product and client success all aligned. And that takes a ton of EQ. You are looking at a ton of different personalities in the room that have definitely different motivations for the company. And we're the ones that really have that high EQ to facilitate those conversations and word things in different ways to kind of drive that conversation where we need to go while we're getting everyone's buy-in. So I think it only becomes more important as you kind of grow in your CSM career if you choose to go into management.
Yeah, Katie. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Cami.
Go ahead,
I'm
Cami.
like a serial interrupter today.
No, that's okay.
Please do.
When you talked about different personalities, Katie and Andrew, how you mentioned it being different in the workplace versus your personal life, that made me think about one of kind of the questions we talked about was how do you improve your EQ? And something I had written down was kind of the more exposed you are to different kind of personalities, different audiences, that will really exercise your EQ. I mean, the EQ indicators are different for different types of people. If I'm on the phone with my sister and she's crying, I think she's upset, but like a C-level stakeholder isn't going to cry to me on a call. So kind of picking up on him, hopefully hasn't happened yet. But him, being upset is going to look a lot different. So yeah, I think that's kind of an essential practice to improve your EQ, just be with a diverse audience and personalities and stuff, which we're lucky to do as CSMs. We can do that.
Yeah, I was reading something where they said one of the ways to improve your EQ and specifically your empathy was to read books with complex characters where you are forced into understanding their perspective on things, which I thought was really interesting. But it's apparently a proven, I don't know, Katie, Justin, you studied this, but it was, literature that involves complex characters where you're forced to understand their perspective by reading through the content.
I definitely think that's helpful, especially different forms of communication are going to elicit different responses from people. I personally am not the most direct person at my company, but we do have people who are more direct. And initially I would take that, very to heart. And I'd be like, oh no, are they actually mad at me? And it took me a while to kind of get used to that personality type and figure out the EQ and kind of their cues of, are they mad or are they just trying to mince words to make sure that I understand very quickly and very clearly what they're talking about without trying to be rude or mean. It's not, they're not trying to attack me. They're just trying to tell me something in 3 words. So I think having exposure to that, whether it's reading or movies or, different clients. I know Cami works with clients in both languages, so I'm sure that provides some complexity too. But I think the more you can get exposed, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah. So Cami, that's a great question. How does that, you're dealing with Latin America in addition to North America? Yeah. Is there any change in the way you empathize? Because of is there a difference?
Yeah. I mean, At Evolution, we had kind of a little bit of a success story. I mean, obviously our product is in English. And so, you know, calls, emails, it's assumed there to be in English. We did have a customer who underwent a training in English, and you know, I was on a call with them, and this was in English. This is before we kind of officially rolled out kind of our Spanish services offerings. And I noticed there was almost like zero participation on the call. There were short answers. There was hesitancy to answer and nervousness. And I just kind of switched to Spanish. And then all of a sudden we had all 10 people speaking. And since then we've officially rolled out kind of our Spanish services, and it's been such a success story for us because you know, their engagement with us is, I literally have a graph where it's like this.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so again, there's that kind of EQ skill. It's translatable to everything we're talking about, noticing that nervousness, noticing that hesitancy they had. And you know, that doesn't mean CSMs have to download Duolingo and or give Rosetta Stone and learn another language. That can be picked up in English, you know. It's just kind of the intuition.
But just, you know, all that aside, empathy alone, I would assume that if English is a second language for a group of people, that speaking, you know, learning how to use a product in their native tongue is going to be it's going to make them a lot more comfortable.
Well, right. And naturally, obviously, I grew up with English, so naturally it's a little more uncomfortable for me to have switched to Spanish. Right. But for them, it was more comfortable. And that's, you know, what customer success is. You know, we're meeting them where they are. I'd rather be the loser and the nervous one. And I'd rather make Spanish mistakes and them be more comfortable than the other way around.
That's the right way of thinking. And we've been fortunate enough, as I mentioned in the beginning, to train people all over the world. And when we're dealing with teams from APAC, for example, it'd be easy for me to say, well, yeah, we have to do it, you know, my morning, it'll be the end of your day. But what I could do is I can, you know, and we did this for a number of customers, including HP, one of our largest customers. I did an 8 p.m. to midnight shift because it was one of me. There were 20 of them, right? I wanted to meet them where they were. I wanted to adjust the delivery. It was definitely more painful for us, but it was a single one of me. And I wanted to meet the customer where they were and where they were going to be able to absorb that material in the best place possible. So let's continue down this path of talking about how you can improve your EQ, and throw out some ideas on that before we start getting to some of the questions that we have in the Q&A section. Now, Katie, you mentioned this assertive style of communication, which I 100% agree with that, right? You can be assertive, you can communicate in a direct way while still respecting other people and their opinions. But that is always been something that has helped me and boost my EQ, right? Not beating around the bush, netting things out, right? But once again, being respectful with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest EQ skills to learn. We've all had to say no to a client. We all don't want to have to say no to a client, but I think, and this I think comes with experience as well, but if you say yes to a client and then down the road, you're like, wow, really shouldn't have said yes to that because now I'm in a lot of hot water. I think that kind of gives you the impetus to go back and start getting stronger in that area where you can say, and you can kind of foresee what will happen if you say yes. And you can start to pivot some of those conversations when you're saying no, or I'm sorry, we can't do that. You can start to use that as an opener and make it a little bit softer for yourself to say, like, why is that so important to you? Or what is the end outcome that you're looking for from that? And is there another way that we can solve this? So you're still saying no, but you're also offering how to help. And you're still there. You're still kind of in the trenches with them to figure this out, but you're not putting your company or yourself in that position to deliver something that you really can't do.
Well, it's the no but approach, right?
Right.
I was just talking about this with a group yesterday I was coaching, how to effectively say no. Say it's the no but good point that you bring up, Katie, is doing some research, asking the whys, that sort of thing, not just saying no. What else What else do you, Justin, Cammie, Katie, do you think will improve your EQ?
Yeah, I wanted to first go back to something Katie said in her previous session was, or not session, but previous statement. She was talking about having to, or I'm sorry, it was Cammie talking about being uncomfortable, right? Being uncomfortable in the moment. I think one of the best ways we can probably build our emotional quotient and put yourself in that uncomfortable position. Put yourself there and feel it. Understand, what you're feeling in that moment, and try to work with it. For me, I experience a lot of anxiety, just generalized anxiety across the board. And so it's sitting in those moments and realizing, one, what are the physical signs about my body that are causing me to feel this way? Is it my heart rate? Is it my body temperature is rising? And then going back to the mind and trying to understand, why do I feel this way? What is causing this anxiety? And then the next time I feel that, I can react differently to it and react in a way that might be a little bit more socially appropriate, or a way that might be better suited in that scenario. I think being uncomfortable is probably the best way for us to grow.
But how do you do that? How do you do that, Justin? How do you, that's great in theory, but what do you, so I'm the type that, and I 100% agree with you, but for example, I'm the type to use sticky notes. I know it's an old, I'm actually writing on, but then again, I am writing notes on paper here. So, but do you use things like sticky notes? Do you have have a little mantra you say before you get on a call?
Well, for me, like, doing calls like this is a precursor to me of, like, I would experience anxiety when going into public conversations. To me, in order to adapt to certain situations, I try to take out every other variable that might cause me anxiety. So, for example, today I shut my door so I didn't hear any outside noises. I put on a sound machine so that I didn't have to deal with other noises. And so you find ways to adapt to a certain situation. For you, that's sticky notes, of making sure you write down prompts of what you want to talk about later, or what you want to discuss later on within that topic. I think we all find ways that we will utilize certain tools around us to adapt in that situation. And it's different for everyone.
Well, preparation is key.
Yes.
Preparation is key.
Yeah.
It's funny, when I was younger, and thank God the internet really wasn't around then. I one of the ways that I combated a just intense shyness, which people laugh at these days, is I did some stand-up comedy in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard, getting myself up there, exposing myself to a bunch of people that literally exposing, but exposing my twisted sense of humor to a bunch of people that I didn't know, and it was absolutely terrifying. But it forced me to become more comfortable with public speaking.
There's also some physiological kind of items that you can do. Justin's probably familiar with some of these, but humor and play is one of the biggest ones. It's a natural antidote to stress. So you really can't be stressed when you're laughing or having fun. And obviously, if you're on, some of my CSMs deal with some of the world's largest clients, they're not going to come on and just start cracking jokes. But you can have an icebreaker question that's going to loosen everyone up a little bit and allow you to kind of bring back your emotional state, kind of to homeostasis. And that's really going to allow you to focus. And then again, practice that active listening and kind of calm yourself down. Another easy one, everyone always has water on their desk. You can put an ice cube right on your wrist. It's going to automatically kind of suppress that stress response and allow you to relax. And then again, if you have your sticky note or you have your door closed, you're like, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm in a good place. And now I can do my job.
Awesome. So taking an assertive style of communicating, active listening, these kind of little kind of life hacks to remind yourself to take that step back. Actually, speaking of that, taking that step back, I think that's something that's super important as well. And I end every one of these webinars, as well as all my coaching calls, with this same request every single day: make space for yourself. right? You want to reduce that stress. You want to increase your EQ. You want to increase your self-awareness and self-control. Don't get sucked into the craziness, the whirlwind that is your day. Step away, go center yourself, whether it's taking a walk around the block, going somewhere else and having lunch, close your laptop, turn off your phone, go and find your center. All right. Go meditate. If that's what, do some yoga. I do a mixture of yoga, meditation, and just listening to music, just to kind of step aside. Super important. Another practice that I think is a good practice to improve your EQ is responding to conflict instead of reacting to it. Right? You want to stay calm in stressful situations, and you don't want to make impulsive decisions. So whenever I have a situation, whenever I've had a situation where I've had to either have to have a difficult conversation with a customer, whether I have an emergency, and the few times I've got to respond to that electronically, I go ahead and type something up. I walk away, and then I come back a few minutes later, sit down and read it, and say, okay, once again, I'm going to employ some empathy, and I'm going to try and put myself in the perspective of the person who's about to receive this, and say to myself, okay, how is this person going to receive what I'm about to say? And even if and for sticky situations, you need to get on the phone. You need to pick up the phone and call folks, but you need to prepare. Right? You need to prepare yourself. So you really need to think through the situation, what you're hearing, what you're about to say, and look at it from all those different angles.
Can I speak to that really quick, Andrew? You mentioned,
yes, of course.
You mentioned sending emails. One of the things I think, at least when I was initially starting out as a CSM, I would get customers emailing that they're frustrated, and in those moments, you want to respond quickly, right? You feel that you need to respond quickly because they're frustrated. They, in the email it says big bold letters, urgent, right? When in most cases it's not something urgent, but in that moment you want to respond. And me being an emotional person, the first couple of times I did that, I realized, my response to them was not appropriate. And so I think one thing that we can do if you're really wanting to improve your EQ is to type out that email and don't send it. And then come back in 15, 20 minutes and reread it, and you'll realize the mistake that you were, or, realize what you could say differently that's not going to harm the situation. But again, I think, like you said, always calling is probably better. But if you're trying to improve, that could be a strategy that you employ.
Yeah, but rushing to respond, to your point, could cause more harm than good.
Yes.
And there are very few situations where you have to respond right this moment. I used to coach my teams that all the time. Like you get something coming in from a customer, and they seem to be really hot. You do not respond right away. Right? We are not working on, we are not working on things that require immediate response. 99.9% of the time, it doesn't require an immediate response.
And usually what I found when I would respond to customers in that situation and they replied back, they just come back more frustrated and more angry. So you're just heightening the situation. You're, like you said, you're making a little bit more worse than it needs to be.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Any other thoughts, Katie, Cammie, Justin, on how you can improve your EQ?
I think to kind of just add on to what you guys were just saying, I was kind of thinking about how, like, with customer success, like as a CSM, you're often kind of the liaison between your internal team and the external team. And I oftentimes feel the sensation of like, don't kill the messenger, or like you're the middleman who takes a lot of heat. So just kind of adding to what you were saying, Justin, I think there's kind of a natural like defensiveness that can arise a lot in this position, like from both sides, like, oh gosh, my consultants are going to hate having to do this, or, oh gosh, I don't want to tell the customer we can't do this, or whatever. So I think too, kind of checking that even subconscious defensiveness that arrives so often in this role.
Yeah. And I also think that to add on to that, Cammie, that's a great point, but you also need to be really good at taking critique well, right? An important part of increasing your EQ is being open to criticism. right? Where our hope is that criticism is always constructive. Don't get offended, right? And also, if the delivery of that criticism isn't ideal, once again, think about, employ some empathy, think about the perspective of the individual that's giving you that criticism, and, make sure that you are giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're not trying to be mean. They just might not be have as high EQ as you do, right? So the best thing to do is to take that criticism and employ some active listening techniques, respond back and say, okay, so what you're saying is and this, and this, right? You're saying that I messed up here, here, and here, right? In a softer, in a more professional way. And they're likely going to, unless they're just a mean jerk, they're likely going to say, yeah, that's it. And not only have you extracted, the most important information from what they're sharing with you, you've also provided them with some indirect coaching on here's how you might want to kind of position that next time that you see this situation.
And I think that kind of situation is one of the perfect areas to start growing your skill set there and having kind of canned responses. No one likes to be criticized. Everyone's going to get a little defensive. So if going into the situation, anytime someone gives you feedback, and maybe you can kind of feel yourself getting upset if it's not positive feedback, you can have a default ready to go, which is, what do you think I could do to improve? Or give me some additional feedback on what I could do better next time. So you immediately come with a response so you can pull yourself out of your emotional state, hear what they think that you should do differently. And then that gives you even just a second to breathe and be like, they are trying to be helpful. They do have some suggestion and I should be open to it. And at least in this conversation, I didn't come back being combative or aggressive. And now I can take this, I can go for a walk outside, I can take 5 minutes and I can really think about it. And if I have follow-up questions, I can set up another call with them and ask them for more details. And it kind of just gives you that emotional break from the situation.
And that emotional break is super important, right? Because if you don't take that emotional break, we can find ourselves being sucked into this negative attitude and a bad mood, right? And you don't want to be drawn into that, right? You don't want to be drawn into that. And that's why taking a break throughout the days to refresh, like I mentioned, using meditation or when I'm doing a lot of heavy content development, heavy work, I use a Pomodoro technique, right? Which is 25 minutes on and then 5 minutes off. And after 3 breaks, you take a 15-minute break to walk away. Those types of things kind of help you kind of maintain a good level throughout your day. All right, let's answer some questions. It's 1:45. Just a reminder, we will answer questions up until 15 past the hour. So remember, this is a 75-minute webinar. We will stick around as late as we can until 1/4 past the hour, answer as many questions as possible. If you have a question, this would be the time to either ask it or upvote one of your questions. So first question comes from Paige. Paige, thanks for the question. Paige asks, how would you approach a customer that is aggravated through empathy? What words or phrases would be the best to use, and what words should we avoid? Who's dealt with an aggravated customer?
Man, I feel like we've all dealt with aggravated customers.
Exactly.
For me, I'll bring up a previous experience that I had at my previous job. I was working as a CSM. I was really close with this individual. I had built up a relationship with her. I'd been working with her for a couple of years now. Let's just call her Jennifer, I guess. I don't want to shout out her real name or whatnot. But she wasn't necessarily an executive team member. She was more like director level. And with that rapport, she's very honest with me. She would come to the calls every month prepared with what she wanted to say. And, being in a COVID world, everything's, virtual like this. And so she comes to the call and she flips on the camera, and I immediately could tell she was aggravated. She was frustrated. She wasn't smiling. She didn't have the same demeanor, the same posture that she did in previous conversations. And so the way that I approached it was it was just her and I on the call, and I wrote out the agenda. I'm like, okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. And I said, but first, Jennifer, is everything okay? You seem a little different today. And I think when you build up that relationship with your customer, it's much easier to ask those type of questions versus asking a question like that to someone you just met. Like, hey, what's wrong with you? You don't want to go up to someone and randomly ask them what's wrong with them.
What's your problem?
Because they might get offended by it. But when you built that relationship with someone, it's easier to ask the question, and they're going to give you a much more honest answer. At first, she said, well, I'm very frustrated. I opened up a feature request and development told me they have no timeline. I'm sure that's a very common thing we all hear as CSMs. Feature request is not getting done right away. And I continue to ask further. It's like, hey, we've already had this discussion about this feature. Is there something else going on? As we had the conversation further, come to find out that morning she had a call with her team members, and they were all frustrated at her because of something else that had happened a couple of days ago. And she's just now getting that feedback from the team. And so, she's just kind of in a heightened state and she was upset herself. And so I think in those moments, you can just ask questions. I think curiosity is probably one of the biggest things we can utilize as a CSM.
Yeah, I love
that's
that.
How I approached it.
Well, you asked a question and she was frustrated, but you kept peeling things back and realized that, oh yeah, she's annoyed, but it's not about this. She's just jumped on this because this is the current thing that she's dealing with, but it was about something else. And I think that, giving her the space to kind of offload that to somebody,
100%,
right? And just listening and sometimes when people say, how do you deal with pissed off customers? Sometimes you just need to give them the space to unload what they're frustrated about. Right?
Yeah.
Cammie, Katie, you got anything to add?
I would just say you can kind of match, especially if they're not responding well to you being overly empathetic, you can kind of match your personality. I always tell my CSMs, we're a bit like a chameleon or a politician in that sense. And I don't mean to change your entire personality, but I'm a naturally bubbly person. And if I get on the call with a client who's not very bubbly at all, I'm going to try to tone that part of me down a little bit and communicate in the same style that they communicate in. It's not to say I'm going to get aggressive or short with them back, but I'm going to, try to not cut around the bush with them and be as straightforward as I can be with the situation. And again, I think Justin's tips were great, like asking those questions and maybe being more direct in those, like, why is this such a big deal? Why, or I wouldn't use big deal because then they might get a little angry, but how is this impacting your day-to-day? What are you unable to do without this? How can I help? And just being a little bit more straight with them if they're kind of like, stop telling me you're sorry. Like, I don't care that you're sorry. Just trying to kind of cut to the chase and get to solutions with them quickly.
I like what Amanda put in chat. Don't tell them to calm down.
I was just looking at that. Never tell someone to calm down.
Don't tell me to calm down. I'm annoyed.
No one wants to hear those words.
Nobody wants to hear. Yeah. What I have found really effective is it's not good enough for you to say, I understand. Right? I think you need to take the next step and say, I understand, and regurgitate back to them why you understand. It's not just that you understand, because that could just be, that's my script. No, I understand. I would be frustrated as well if this particular situation happened. Right? Or that's another great one. I hear you. Or there was a post I did a couple of weeks ago about a friend of mine who was dealing with a rental car fiasco. And went through 3 different rental cars over like 2 days in Southern California. And she was getting more and more frustrated. And she finally found a rental car counter employee who said, I've got you. Right? I'm on, basically, I'm on your side. I'm going to take care of you. Right? I'm going to address this issue. Right? But once again, you have to give people the space to offload all of that. Sometimes people you've got to just shut up and listen and let them offload that frustration. That in itself can help calm down an aggravated customer. And not doing it by shutting off, pulling your headphone out of the, and not listening, but you really need to listen to them. And you not only need to listen for the content, but also the context. I understand you're frustrated. I would be frustrated too in this particular situation. Here's what I'm hearing from you. I'm hearing that this happened and then this happened and then this happened. Right? That in itself can calm a situation down. Hey, this person's actually listening to me. They understand where I'm coming from. They understand the emotional hook here that I'm frustrated. And that can actually do tremendous amount can be tremendously beneficial to calming down the situation.
And Andrew, I think you touched on something really important there too on the EQ side of things. And Cami, I know you briefly touched on this earlier. We typically are the bearer of bad news to a lot of different people, whether it's internal or external. One of the biggest things that we have to do is set aside our own emotions. I assume that rental car counter agent was not the one who made any mistakes or caused this lady to have a ton of different problems, but she took it upon herself to say, whatever, I've got you, it's our fault, like we're going to figure this out. And us as CSMs, and I'm always telling my direct reports this, like, it may be a product's fault and you may have a direct line of like exactly who did what. It doesn't matter to the client in the moment. And most of the time, and I'm sure your friend knew weeks later, it wasn't this lady's fault, it wasn't that person's fault, but like somebody helped me through my problem when it wasn't their problem to fix. And that gives you so much leeway with a client, because then you're starting to build that trusted advisor. They know that if something goes wrong, they can come to you whether or not it was your fault, and you're going to help them find a solution. And that just makes that relationship so much stronger down the road.
And it wasn't even a matter, but that's great. That's a great point, Katie. It wasn't a matter of who was at fault or not. It wasn't a matter of apologizing whether we screwed up or there was something, or your product sucks or what have you. You're apologizing for the situation that they're in. So that's not taking ownership for anything. You're apologizing, you're sympathizing, you're empathizing for the situation that you're in. And you're taking some ownership out of, I'm going to help you solve this situation. There's no admission of wrongdoing whatsoever. At the end of the day, I just want to help you get past this. Cami, I can't hear you.
Oh, no.
There you are.
Okay. Even kind of like a smaller kind of practice to this, and this might already be what you're referring to, but just, I noticed recently, like making them feel prioritized by just, hey, do you want to hop on a call? Like, I know so often we go back and forth on email. I operate like heavily via email, but I know recently, and now that I'm more confident in various situations, it feels like they really appreciate, hey, do you want to hop on a call? And then you're a real voice, you're really there. And then in turn, there you're getting that EQ practice of throwing yourself into a situation. So it's kind of mutually beneficial.
Yeah, that's a great point. Regardless of how uncomfortable you may be, when you are dealing with a challenging situation, the best thing for you to do is to get on a call, get on a Zoom, actually ideally a Zoom or some other telepresence, whether it's Teams or what have you, Google Meets, and be able to look this person in the eye, right? It's virtual, but they'll see you, they'll see your reactions, they'll see your nonverbal cues, you'll be able to see theirs. Completely changes the game. Regardless how comfortable or you are or not, the worst thing that you can do is be in a position to have to deliver bad news virtually. And when I say virtually, via email or chat. Pick up the phone and call them if you can, or get on a Zoom and talk to them face to face. Face to face, to Christina's point in chat, face to face is so much more personal. And when you're dealing with a particularly sticky situation, you need to have that personal connection. Awesome, Paige. Thanks for the question. That was awesome. 9 minutes, and we got through one question. All right, let's get to the next. And the next question at the top of the list is also from Paige. Cami, looks like you want to jump into this. How should we balance EQ and IQ in communicating with customers? Is there such a thing as too much EQ when approaching customers?
Yes, I called dibs on this one, and then I was like, did I interpret that right? So I hope I answer this correctly. My peers, feel free to add to whatever I say or correct. Answering part two first. So is there such thing as too much EQ? I don't think so. Maybe in my experiences so far, I've never seen that. But I don't think there's such thing as too much EQ. I think like
in a lot of CS trainings in my courses, we talk so much about, measurables, KPIs. I know you guys had an awesome session on KPIs before. But, what about the things that aren't measurable? Did the client laugh? Did you guys, make an inside joke? I have a nickname with a customer. I think that's so funny. And so I think things like that go a long way. In terms of like balancing EQ and IQ, that's a tough one. I'll have to call in on my others for that. I thought of an example. There was a C-level client who was super busy, not very responsive to my emails, who agreed to have a call. And I knew like, okay, this is kind of my chance. I want to kind of build an emotional connection. I had noticed something in his email signature. It had to do with foreign languages because that's my passion. And basically I had inquired about it, and it turned into the CEO telling me about his travels and how that's why he started his business. And for about 5 minutes there, he got, really passionate and whatever. And then, we had to return back to business. But yeah, I don't think there can be too much of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I'm
actually going to disagree with you on this one.
Okay.
I'd love Katie and Justin to weigh in, because with your school educational background in this, there's 3 types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, there's emotional empathy, and there's compassionate empathy. And when you're in customer success, I think that you need to stay somewhere between cognitive and emotional empathy. The problem with compassionate empathy is it involves you not only having concern for another person, but sharing their emotional pain. And depending on how much EQ, how EQ-y you are, you can get kind of sucked down into this, into that compassionate empathy. And I think that may be taking it too far. But that's my hot take on that. Justin, Katie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I would kind of agree with you, Andrew. I think, maybe, I don't know if we're necessarily phrasing it the right way, but there are certain levels of emotions that you don't want to take it to with a customer, right? I think staying at a business practical level with your emotional intelligence or your emotional quotient with a customer is probably appropriate. We all deal with different types of emotions in different relationships. Like the emotions I express with my partner are not the same emotions I'm going to express with a CEO of a company. So we do have to be careful of that, right? You want to make sure that you're keeping those professional boundaries. But as far as being empathetic and having that awareness, regardless of what level someone might be at in their organization, whether they're a CEO, a director, or an end user, they're humans. We all experience emotion. I think it's just as important to have that type of relationship. Again, it's a business relationship. You're a trusted advisor. So you should have that relationship with them, but it is going to look different than how some of your other relationships might look like outside of work.
I would agree with Cami on this one. And I think what Justin just walked through just kind of gives insight to how high of an EQ you have. Because with this, like, those relationships are different. So, to kind of have that self-awareness and that self-management to not do that in your business relationships. Or at least I know I have some business contacts that when we're out at dinner, we're out at a conference, we let loose a little bit. We have a little bit more jokes and a little bit more fun. But when we're talking in a business setting, we're sticking to more of those metrics and those KPIs and business appropriate things. But that's because me and the client both have a higher EQ, and we know where and when to have those conversations. And I think this also kind of ties to on the EQ and IQ piece. I know there was another question about like student versus teacher. I think these play off of each other. So you can obviously have the EQ to know when you really know what you're talking about and can kind of show those metrics, show those KPIs, especially if the client's going to respond to those. But I know when I first started at Skupos, consumer product goods, I drink Diet Coke, but I did not know how it arrived at my local store until I started working here, everything that goes into it. I think you can have the EQ in some of those conversations to increase your intelligence or your knowledge about what you're doing and really have those open conversations with the client. Say, I have really no idea what you do. Can you help me understand this, or can you upskill me so that I can talk more intelligently to your coworkers or your boss when I go into my next presentation? And so you can kind of balance those and facilitate deeper conversations by kind of ping-ponging between your EQ and your IQ in those situations.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's, once again, I think it's that balance between cognitive EQ and emotional EQ. Right. But awesome. Hey, Paige, thank you for the question. Cami, if you can hit the done button for me. Let's get on to our next question here. And I know that we've lost a number of people here because we're past the top of the hour, but we're going to keep going here as long as possible. Simone, thank you, Simone, for the question. Simone asks, how do you build a relationship with a client who is not responsive? Any tips?
I love that one because I feel like everyone as a CSM, if you have not experienced a customer who does not want to talk to you, then you have not done CS work yet. I feel like we've all had relationships like that. I don't necessarily need to go first, but I just had to point that out.
No, it's true.
I guess, so what I would do, at least what I do in those situations when customers aren't responsive, usually they're not responsive because you haven't given them a reason to be responsive. I think having a high EQ can put you in a situation where you understand the customer a little bit better, understand that person a little bit better. Obviously, in order to understand how someone works, how they operate, you need to be able to communicate with them. But there are other inadvertent ways you can do that, like look at LinkedIn or Google, like try to find information about this person that will give you key insights into what they do on a day-to-day basis. Maybe their LinkedIn talks about what they are doing on a day-to-day basis at work, or maybe they put something on there about their dog. Maybe they just adopted a dog or something. Having some personal information or having some additional information about someone and talking about that with them can really help flip kind of that script and make them a little bit more responsive, because now you're talking about them. Usually what I see, CSMs who fall into this trap, it's because they're trying to get to the customer about what they want, what they need from that relationship. And we have to understand that not everyone wants that. They want you to think about them and their situation. I think the whole point is to help them solve their problems. So putting yourself in their shoes is really beneficial.
Yeah, I think too, something we try to practice, at least in the CS department at Evolution, is what can you provide them? So like if we know a customer uses the tool for XYZ or a certain use case, like if our marketing team publishes an ebook or a white paper or an article that has to do with that, we'll just reach out, hey, here's this, like giving them kind of a reason to respond.
And Justin, from our training, that's one of the first things that we talk about in level 1 is always make sure that we are providing value with every yes. touch. Right? You want your customers to respond to you, make sure you're providing them with value. All right. Please do not, if you are doing this, please stop with a just checking in email.
Right? Yes, thank you.
Right? There will come a point when you get to a just checking in email, but that is a long way down the relationship. That is when you have established a lot of rapport, a lot of the trusted advisor relationship with what likely will be a small segment of your customers. Then you can do the just checking in, because it's really more, you're at a point where you're really more in a much more friendly connection with these folks. Hey, I'm just checking in. How was your golf game? Blah, 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 blah. Right. But when you are starting out or starting to build a relationship with a customer, every time you reach out to them needs to be, I'm providing value, not I'm checking off a box because my boss told me to reach out to you. Simone, thanks for the question. Next question comes from LinkedIn, from Claude. I have the Daniel Goleman version, wondering what is the difference between that book and 2.0. I don't know what the difference is. Justin, you have it. Daniel Goleman, is that just a different, I think that's a different book, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's a different book, Claude. This is Travis Bradberry. So
yeah, and Gene Breeze.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have more for you on that, Claude. Bob, welcome. Thanks for attending. Bob, I got to meet Bob and spend some time with Bob a couple of weeks ago at Pulse. Great guy. Check him out. On the web here. Bob asks, I'm a fan of curiosity. Customers react well when we are students, not always teachers. Thoughts?
I love
I
this
mean,
question.
Yes,
talked about this,
100%
right?
agree with it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I'm an avid learner, so like I love this. And I think everyone who's an expert in whatever they're doing, they're willing most of the time to share their skills, and they want to. That's what they've spent a lot of the times. The people who my team are working with have been at these companies for 10, 20, 30 years. They have a ton of experience and they're willing to. So I think it helps deepen the relationship when you're like, hey, you know more than me. Can you just help me out? Or like, can you tell me about this? And I think it just goes miles in those relationships.
But also, even if you know the answer, asking that question, engaging with them is a way to open up a channel of communication. This is active listening 101, right? Sorry, Justin, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, when you build curiosity, you build so much insight into a business. You learn so much about not just that individual, but the company in general. I think we've talked about it a couple times during this session, but curiosity is definitely a good skill that every CSM should probably grab onto.
Yeah. Cammie, you got anything to add?
No, yeah, I just know that like customers totally kind of light up when they get to have the teacher moment. I know I have no experience in computer science and enterprise architecture is so complex. And I'm like the first to tell my customer, like, that is not a question for me. Let me find you an answer. But I do know on business reviews, I'll give them the mic to kind of teach me, hey, what projects are you working on? And they love to explain it to me. And of course I'm like, okay, but I have to ask follow-up questions or else I just don't know what they're saying. And I just noticed they really love that. They get passionate to speak on, their expertise. And then I learned. So there we go.
Okay, here's a quick coaching tip for you, Cammie. Instead of saying, I don't know the answer to that, say, I've got some ideas, but I don't want to lead you astray. Let me go find somebody to validate these with. That way you're not admitting that you don't know the answer. You are expressing to the customer that you're going to put forth the effort to make sure the answer is the right one. And you're going to learn something in the process. So something to think about. Awesome, Bob. Thanks. And thanks for joining us. Paige, again, another question from Paige. Not sure if this was answered in any way. How do you practice or further develop your EQ? Okay, I think we went through a whole bunch of those. So any other thoughts? Justin, you jumped in on this. Any other thoughts beyond what we've already talked about?
Not personally. I feel like I gave some tips. I actually clicked the button a little too prematurely earlier in the discussion, and then we started to talk about it. So
that's okay. Hit that. Then do me a favor. Hit that done button. We did rattle off a number of those. So another question from LinkedIn Live. Who are the new CSM guys? Sorry, Franklin. Not the time or the place to talk about this. Who the new CSM companies are up and coming in the U.S. We will have a leadership roundtable later on in the year about some of the different platforms. So I'd recommend tuning into that one. So check on the events tab at successcoaching.co and you'll be able to find it under there. Lambert asks, how would you manage irate customers even when you try applying this emotional intelligence by empathizing with them? Just because this issue was no fault of anyone, but they seem to not be convinced. Some go as far as hurling insults and escalating to managers. How best would you interact with this type of customer? It sounds like a classic irate or bully customer out of our training in level 1, Justin.
Yes, it does.
How do you deal with? I mean, telling them to calm down is not a good strategy.
No, it's not.
We've already talked about that. How do you deal with that? Has anybody had that type of customer that they've dealt with before?
I actually had a CEO one time cursing at me on the phone. It was not a fun experience at all. And I was a young CSM at that time too. So I'm like, whoa, what did I just get myself into? Thankfully, I had my boss on there at that time because this was a relatively large customer for us as a business. But in that instance, we just ended the call, to be honest, because usually when people are in that heightened of a state, it's really hard to use reasoning to bring down the conversation. And sometimes it's just a matter of, okay, we all need to take a break and step away from the situation, and let's come back to it at a later point. Yeah. So I don't know if I would have abruptly ended the call like my boss had done at that time, but I would have said something. I would have said something to the point of, okay, well, let's kind of, take this offline for now, and let's regroup in a day or two after we've had some additional time to think about it. It's okay to regroup and think about the situation later if you're not able to use reasoning in that moment.
Yeah, and I'm sure Justin has had a ton of escalations come his way too. That's usually when we get brought in. But even when my CSMs come to me and, a call didn't go well, and maybe I wasn't on it, it ended, hopefully not abruptly, but they got through it, it ended. I will reach out to those customers a couple of days later and say, hey, let's jump on the phone and let's talk about what happened. If the client is truly just awful, I'm not afraid to protect my team and say, like, this is not going to be tolerated. Like, we have a partnership with you. I'll say it in a nicer way. We don't necessarily need to continue that partnership, but if things are going wrong, there are better ways to handle it. And yelling at your dedicated account manager is not going to be tolerated. So I think there are lines with this where if empathy and your EQ is just not getting anywhere with this customer, maybe it is time to cut ties or give them a little harsh love just to make sure that they're treating your people with respect, at least when things are not going right.
I actually threatened a customer once that we would no longer do business with them. I had a customer, every time this customer's representative would pop up in chat, the support team that reported up underneath me, when we're all located in the same floor. So I would, I found this out after the fact. I all of a sudden I see the 4 support managers walk into the middle of because they sat across from each other. Well, 4 support folks would walk into the middle of the aisle and they'd Rochambeau. They were Rochambeauing. And I was like, what's going on? And they said, well, so-and-so from this company is so nasty to us that every time she pops up in chat, we Rochambeau. Whoever loses ends up having to deal with her. And so I kind of peeled back things a little bit, and I discovered what was going on. This person was absolutely horrible to my team. And I looked at the chat logs, and just a nasty individual. And they weren't a huge customer. They weren't necessarily a small customer, but it's not worth taking the abuse. And so I picked up the phone and I called this individual's boss's boss, who was the key stakeholder. The VP of Finance. It was an accounting package that I was one of the first cloud-based accounting packages. And I called up this VP of Finance and I said, "Hey, listen, you and I haven't spoken before. You don't really know me, but here's a situation. We're your accounting provider, and here's a situation with this individual. And while we value your business, I am not going to have my team be subjected to that kind of abuse on a regular basis by this individual. So either we need to come up with a different contact who's reaching out to my team, or we need to part as friends, and I will help you. I will extract your data. I'll do all that stuff. But you're going to need to move to somewhere else, to a different vendor, because I am not going to put my team through the abuse." And we never heard from that individual again. So, you're not paid enough. Nobody's paid enough to put up with that.
No.
Lambert, thanks for the question. We're at the end of our time. We were at the end of our time that we've got for today. I think it was a great conversation, but it's not what I think. It's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Coaching. Also, please feel free to reach out to me if you've not connected yet, so that you can stay in the loop. I post a lot of content, generally weekly, if not more often. So lots of information. So connect to us or Success Coaching. I want to thank my amazing panelists for spending the time with us and for the ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices that you shared. And hi again, Cammie's parents. I hope I think she did you proud. She did a great job. One final note, great CSMs know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. And that's why we created the CSM Mastermind series to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our next event on October 19th, when we'll talk about using active listening, something we talked about a couple times today, to improve customer relationships. Until then, as I stated before, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everybody. See you soon.